News gathering at NBN has undergone many changes for the better during the past 21 years. Today's operation in roomy, pleasant surrounds is a far cry from that of March 4th, 1962. Our news service was set up by Murray Masterton, who was assisted by 2 journalists from a radio station. The first news was read by Murray Finlay, who is still reading, although the format has been expanded from 30 minutes to 1 hour each evening. Murray is also the news editor, taking over from Masterton some years ago when he was appointed to a teaching position in South Australia. Our one cameraman recorded each day's happenings on a hand-wound camera, and it's ironical that the first film story to go to air 21 years ago was the counting of votes from a federal election. During the first 5 years, the journalistic staff was increased to 5, and since then numbers have grown to 13 to cope with the many news bulletins prepared each day at NBN. Our camera crews were also increased and sound cameras purchased. In 1972, NBN was the first regional station to expand to an hour of news each evening. Others tried and discontinued 60 minutes of news each night, while NBN has maintained this service. 10 years ago, satellites began beaming world stories to NBN, taking seconds instead of days for a major story to reach our newsroom from London or New York. With more and more demand for instant electronic news, NBN expanded its services. Bulletins are prepared in our newsroom for breakfast time, midday, afternoon, tea time and mid-evening. To meet these increasing number of deadlines, our crews had to be more mobile. We dashed to local happenings in vehicles equipped with two-way radio, now in our own helicopters.
VJWV News to Chopper 3, over.
Chopper 3, go ahead.
We've got an urgent news job on here. We want you to proceed to Cessnock, over.
The NBN chopper now has facilities to beam stories happening anywhere in our viewing area direct to your TV set. Day-to-day coverage has also been speeded up with the introduction of electronic cameras, where tape has replaced film. We have a hard-working and dedicated team in our newsroom to keep you informed of local, national and world events.
As farces go, a little bit of fluff has the usual number of mistaken identities and confusions, this time centring around a pearl necklace and a bus accident, but it's not tightly enough written to make those confusions seem unavoidable, and that's what farce is all about. Given these holes in the fabric, Maitland Repertory needed a much more polished production to gloss over them. A little bit of fluff was taken at a hesitant pace last night, with the exception of the lively third act, and that went a long way to make up for the slowness of the first two. Of the actors, only Steve Ryan, as the woman-fearing neighbour, had that larger-than-life style that this rather ordinary farce needs to lift it. He rather overplayed his hand at times, but he got the play's biggest laughs and deserved them. Director Barry Alsop didn't get enough assurance from the rest of his cast to match Mr. Ryan's antics, and this rather unbalanced the play. Of course, this is your critic's opinion. I must say that last night the audience seemed to enjoy the show hugely.
And now, a little further up the valley, wine lovers attending the Hunter Vintage Festival abandoned their glasses for a day at the races. The Vineyard Picnic Race Day held at Rothbury attracted a huge crowd. It was one of those occasions where only the most daring riders jumped into the saddle. But for those who braved the hot conditions, the rewards were impressive. And so, with no further ado, they were off in the dusty 400-metre Improvers Head.
Get it on, Troy!
The fire was first noticed early yesterday morning and kept firemen busy for most of the day. A fireman at the scene told me that some of the spot fires looked like they'd been deliberately lit. The fire burnt along McCaffrey Drive and at the rear of Rankin Park Hospital. A large area of bush went up, but no property was threatened. If a westerly wind had been blowing, a spark could have carried across Lookout Road and set Blackbutt Reserve alight. A concerned Alderman John Tate is the chairman of the Blackbutt Reserve Local Committee.
I'd like to just issue a very strong plea for people to be most aware of the fact that Blackbutt Reserve is a special place, and to be very careful with anything that could even remotely suggest that there could be a fire in the reserve.
The rainforest canopy, I believe, is a feature of this reserve and under threat by fire, of course.
Well, it would be if there was a fire got into the reserve. It was destroyed some years ago, and it is reforming very slowly. Rainforests are not things that are developed quickly, and we're very fortunate that over the last few years the rainforest area has been developing and is continuing to develop, and that in itself is something that we really must preserve, because there's just no rainforest area so close to the city of Newcastle than what exists in Blackbutt.
What about access to water? Is it a problem?
The project is sponsored by the Premier's Department through the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences in Sydney. In any year, the train travels 16,000 kilometres throughout the state, bringing a rare glimpse of our past to country areas. The exhibition takes you down a timeline from 1788 to Federation, with a special feature on gold prospecting.
The set traps were placed around the outside of the top of the mine, or they were sometimes put into the bottom of the shaft. They were baited with a brass nugget which glinted in the sun and the moonlight, and if you were unlucky enough to spy that bait and decided to help yourself, you could have been trapped by the hand or the foot.
This is just one of the many items of interest on board the museum train. It's called a stereoscope, and as you can see, the picture has two different images taken by a camera with two lenses. And back in the 1870s, when the ladies in the parlour were wanting to amuse themselves, they'd look at the stereoscope, and lo and behold, a three-dimensional picture.
It's not easy carrying valuable and fragile museum pieces around in a train, as Education Officer Richard Wood explains.
We have to pack just about everything, first of all in tissue, then plastic, in cardboard containers underneath their display shelves every time the train moves. Sometimes, in fact, if the train has to be shunted just a matter of metres, we have to do a full pack and then an unpack before we can open.
The train is open to school groups and the public until the 20th of March, and it's located at railway sidings on Wharf Road. Janelle is no stranger to showgirl quests after having won the Newcastle Showgirl contest just a few weeks ago. Although she now lives in Charlestown, Janelle does have a rural background.
My father has 2 farms in the Northern Hunter area, and therefore I have spent most of my time there. It's my rural background.
The Royal Easter Show is a big occasion. I guess it'd be a gala event for you.
Yes, very.
That's not too far away either.
No, that's in about 2.5 weeks.
There are some big prizes in this competition too, aren't there?
That's right. There's one trip to London, that's the main prize, but there's also trips to Asia, Hong Kong, and various Australian trips.
Why did you enter the Miss Showgirl contest?
I thought it was a good challenge at the time. Thought it'd be good to meet other girls, and also because of the rural aspect, because I really enjoy agriculture. With agriculture, so they're looking for someone who has a lot to do with the land, but also it is judged on pork.
Yeah, we did quite well against Singleton last week, and everyone played fairly well. Meet Chatham High on tomorrow, and hopefully we'll win that game.
If you beat Chatham High, where do you go from here?
Going to Sydney competition, hopefully play one of the top 8 there.
Memorabilia from as far back as 1912 was brought out of mothballs today for the Scott's Store Employees Reunion. Scott's was taken over by the David Jones department store chain in 1957, and the former employees came from all over Australia for a cup of tea and an opportunity to talk over old times. One lady who has seen some dramatic changes in the store is Miss Dot King, who worked for the 2 companies for 53 years. She recalls a variety of concerts put on by the employees during World War II.
The boys themselves were the boys that on our own staff. And that we used to hold reviews. Pretty good reviews too.
Did you ever sing or dance in any of the reviews?
Well, I know that it was as good. I had a tiny little comic part in the beginning with a man named Barlow, young man named Barlow, and I had to sit in his lap at the finale.
If today's reaction is any indication, next year's reunion should be even bigger and noisier. The weed, which chokes waterways and renders crop paddocks useless, was found just 3 months ago by Gosford City Council Weeds Officer Mr Doug Vickery. He says it's impossible to permanently control the weed using chemical or biological methods. Doug, how did the alligator weed first come into this area of the Central Coast?
Well, as far as we can establish, it's come in with turfs that have come down from the Williamtown area. There's no other way at this stage that we can work out any other method that it could have come in from.
What kind of damage does the alligator weed do?
Well, it can clog up waterways, it can take over cultivation areas, it can take over pastures. And
what kind of control are you practicing here?
At this stage, the only control we've got is chemical control. There has been some flea beetle has appeared, but we're not holding out much hope for that at this stage. Eradication, we've been told, is pretty near impossible at this stage until some of the chemical companies come up with an answer for us.
The Olympic 110 metres hurdles champion Thomas Monkland has clocked 7.5 seconds for the 60-metre indoor hurdles at the 14th European titles. This bettered the previous record by 0.4 of a second. The Soviet Union's Tamara Baikova leapt higher than any woman in recorded athletics history when she won the high jump title. She cleared 2.03 metres. As the jump was recorded indoors, it will not be recognised as a world record.
Rankin Park Hospital, officially an annex of Newcastle Hospital and now mainly a therapy centre, sits on 132 hectares at New Lambton. And the fact that Mr Brereton chose to make today's announcement there is indicative that if a new hospital is built, this is the most likely site. Mr Brereton's announcement of a feasibility study does not guarantee Newcastle will get a new hospital, but it does take this recommendation of the Olsen report a step closer to reality. The Olsen report suggests that a new 400-bed hospital should take over many of the specialised services presently located at Newcastle, the Mater and Wallsend. The report sees major problems with outdated buildings, particularly at Newcastle, if a new hospital is not built. Mr Brereton says he is confident that existing hospitals would accept this rationalisation of medical services.
The problem here, certainly we will be looking for their views and their cooperation. We will need that as a vital component in getting this project off the ground.
Do you think you'll get their cooperation? Because they seem to be battling for resources of their own. Often complaints are not being treated well enough.
The Olsen recommendations received, by and large, a very enthusiastic report from the hospitals in the Hunter region, and I would look to that continuing support.
The Minister would not be drawn on the possible cost of raising a new hospital at Rankin Park. He suggested a 200-bed hospital could be built for $20 million. However, informed sources put the cost of the kind of hospital being considered for Newcastle at $130 million. The Minister did admit the state's medical budget is still tight, and he welcomed the NBN Telethon as a practical means of improving specialist services in the area.
To play a part in the telethon later on this month. I will be delighted if we can have some money raised as part of this great community enthusiasm in Newcastle. That will make the job that much easier, and I welcome that.
Its sale is part of the BHP's plan to cut its shipping fleet to 14 by May. The officers on the Iron Barren have been offered voluntary redundancy, while the crew will revert back to a seaman's roster system. A spokesman for the BHP says the cutbacks are due to a downturn in the industry. The Iron Barren will remain at number 3 Dyke until it's sold. So now the Iron Barren joins the Iron Monarch in the ranks of the unemployed. The BHP says that negotiations are underway and offers have been made on the two ships. You really couldn't clues if you were a successful bidder at the NBN Telethon auction at Garden City Shopping Centre today. The bidding was spirited because it's such a good cause. All items auctioned were donated by regional and national companies, and all proceeds went to the NBN Telethon in aid of the radiotherapy section of the proposed oncology unit at the Mater Hospital. The people of Newcastle came out in their thousands to support the cause. $50,000 worth of merchandise was auctioned off, and the organisers say they couldn't be happier with the result.
You were here 120. Are you all done at
The scene of protest action yesterday over the Education Department's delays in providing extra accommodation. Angry parents had withdrawn 167 of their children from classes, and teachers had placed the remaining children on minimum supervision, saying the actions would continue until the buildings arrived. Today, workmen were on the scene early, and by lunchtime the first of the 2 new buildings required was in place. The school's P&C will still go ahead with a scheduled meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow, but no further protest action is expected.